Okay. Hi, JD. How are you?
I'm doing well, Douglas. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. It's nice to meet you. Okay, so you've got a book called Race for What? A White Man's Journey and Guide to Healing Racism from Within. Before we get to the book, the story is kind of interesting. On your bio, it says that you grew up in a predominantly black community and that your parents sort of did that intentionally to make you
Yes.
more racially aware, and they must have been kind of ahead of their time, I think. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about that. What was the percentage? Like, were you the only white kid in the school, or were there a few others? Or
No, there were a few others. So interestingly, the area I grew up in is about 50% white, 50% non-white, which is mostly African Americans. And yet the school district was about 85% black, and then by the time we really got up to middle and especially high school, it was in the 90s in a percentile, like low 90s, about 93% African American students. So the white parents sent their children to private schools for the most part, which was one of the early lessons of kind of the disparities and just the thought process around integration.
give me an idea of what you experienced at that school. Were you bullied, or were you accepted, or how did it work
So
out for you?
I was accepted for the most part. Of course, there was bullying. I'm 5'3", so that didn't help either. But my best friend's 6'3", so that helped a lot. And I was best friends with a family that was well rooted in the community. And so they looked out for me. And so early on, most people knew that I wasn't just JD. I was JD, the Jordan family friend, or Shondo's friend, or, you know. So I was accepted very early on. But we did a lot of trash talking, and so I was not immune to that. They didn't take any special precautions with me. We all had to kind of stick up for ourselves when it came to talking trash.
But in the end, that really bonds people together when you cut through all of that, doesn't it?
I believe that. Oh, I believe that wholeheartedly. That does, and that it's interesting because that's part of what my push is right now, is the fact that we should like lean into the discomfort, even into the arguing and whatnot, instead of kind of cutting people off. I don't want to be their friend because they vote this way or they stand for this. Let's argue and build some bonds, because some of that the childhood memories are people you fought with ended up being your friends after the fight was over, kind of thing. So
Well, I agree with you. And I think that the cancel culture has gotten way out of hand. And I think
yes,
you're absolutely right. I completely agree that we need to face the problems head on and talk
yes,
about things, even if they're uncomfortable, even if people don't like them. We got to get through it because life is not all about comfort and fluffy pillows. Sometimes,
right.
sometimes it's hard, sometimes it hurts, but you get through that. It makes you a better person at the end.
Even healing and strengthening our bodies hurts. Like, right, you go and you work out and
Yeah.
you come back and you're sore the next day, and it hurts. It's discomfort. But yet you get stronger. You're going through a healing process. Sometimes you got to have surgery. That hurts. Sometimes you got to, do rehabilitation, and that process hurts. And yet you're still strengthening and building bonds. And I think that's an important thing that we tend to forget and overlook in this whole discussion of race and politics.
I want to hit on a couple of your talking points. Some of these are really interesting. First one says why you felt more at home amongst black families than on white families.
So for me, I was just accepted for who I was, and our differences and individual traits were accepted. Yes, we talk trash to everybody, so in a way, we kind of all were part of a little bullying or just nitpicking at each other. But I was accepted, and who I was okay as long as I was true to myself. And in white families, and even mine, I felt often that I had to live up to a certain image or a certain perspective, or, the fact that I had Black friends made it difficult for them to be comfortable, and therefore it was difficult for me to be comfortable around them. And so it just wasn't as comfortable and just accepting for who we are, versus in the Black households.
That's an interesting point because I've found that as people become more affluent, they put on this veil
Right.
of what they want people to see rather than what they really are. Not all,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there is that. I think the Who wrote a song called "Eminence Front," which pretty much sums up that idea.
I
So,
know that song. Yes,
yeah.
true.
Okay, so I'm curious now. How come you didn't become a rapper like Eminem, since you were in that culture?
Staying on beat took me a while. Like I just learned how to two-step not too long ago, so that probably was not going to be my strength versus helping them understand their value and work with them that way.
Okay, well, I do see on your bio that you were Nelly's business manager at one point.
Yes, I was. He and I grew up as best friends. He's kneeling next to me on the cover of the book, from our high school prom picture. And I was entrepreneurial early on, come from a background of family who's done a lot of entrepreneurial things. And so when he started to have success, he wanted to do some entrepreneurial things and brought me on in that capacity.
So you invested his money for him? Were you like a financial
To an
manager?
to an extent, I was an advisor for sure, but to the extent of investing in entrepreneurial things like Apple Bottoms clothing, Pimp Juice was the name of an energy drink we created. Even trying to get him a nightclub and buildings and properties and things of that nature. So from that standpoint, yes, I was heavily involved.
Give me an example of white supremacy culture, because there are people out there who really don't think that even exists. And there's this great debate about whether or not it's just a political leverage tool, and or if it's race baiting and stirring up division in this country. But according to your talking points, it says that you have experienced this in your growing up. Give me an example.
My best example is also the deceptive practice of it, and that is that we don't learn about other cultures. We don't, and in not learning about them, we're taught sort of that we are the only culture that needs to be, focused on, and that develops this idea of our greatness and our superiority. And so by not learning about indigenous cultures, by not learning about the values that they're built on, and versus the values that we've created, we develop this inherent sort of feeling of superiority, even if we, or pride, ego, whatever it is, that makes it challenging to say, hey, what makes us so great? And so in doing so, that's part of the struggle of kind of this healing of racism is we don't know about others, but everybody has to know about us in order to kind of make it through our world and choose whether to how much to assimilate.
How do you create a society like the United States where we are all immigrant people from one place or another at one time or another, and yet create a certain bond between all of us to make the country strong? Because there's a fine line between democracy and anarchy, and there's also a fine line between class divisions and the seeds of socialism and communism.
Okay.
How do you juggle all of that? I know it's a big question.
So I think we need to be able to reflect and be challenged, like we were speaking of earlier, in the sort of the arguments instead of the cancel culture, but absolutely be understanding, be curious of others' perspectives. That helps grow bonds, even if you don't agree, to at least be curious and know that there's other perspectives out there to allow ourselves to grow and and come together is very important. But there's value in atonement. There's value in acknowledging mistakes, and I think we've grown very scared of being able to do so. We've and that's part of this kind of idea that I was speaking to earlier, where we don't learn about others, and we're even taught in many cases, like my college world history course was taught, we don't need to learn about Eastern cultures because they never changed, and so they're not valuable to us. So taking that away and actually being willing to learn about others and being willing to repair the harm that we've caused in the past, and being willing to accept that there's other ways of doing things that may be just as, if not more valuable or to us all, is a great starting point.
Or maybe we haven't even thought of it yet.
Yeah.
Why he likes Trump culture? Well, that's an interesting one.
So going back to the same thing, right? I disagree with a lot of the perspective, but I'm allowed to disagree. I'm allowed not to be politically correct. I'm allowed to argue and cuss and get my emotions out as well. And so does Trump culture. It's much more wear it on your sleeve. Hey, this is my problem. And I think in doing so and giving space for that, I've had some conversations that started off as everybody yelling and cussing, but then we kind of got that part out of our system, and then we found some, we both agree that we don't like the way the government is set up. We both agree that, corporations are getting socialism more so than people are getting socialism. We end up both agreeing on a lot more, but we couldn't get there without going through the name calling and at least staying in the conversation. That kind of seemed more open to connection for me anyway, at times.
Well, he did certainly open up that Pandora's box, and he went where a lot of politicians do not want to go.
Yeah, I feel like while I don't like him, he did pull back what I call the curtain on the Wizard of Oz. He was our Toto in many things, and so I appreciate that, and I appreciate the ability to be more out in the open and have a greater discussion about these things. I think we're going through a time of chaos because both right and left wanted change. I think that was obvious after the George Bush era, that we wanted real change. And, Trump was change, whether you like him or not. He brought forth change, and it's something we're going to have to work on to get to where we want to go.
Yeah, he brought it in real fast, and I think a lot of people had difficulty digesting it all because he just sort of slammed everybody with it.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree. And now we've gone, 180 degrees the other direction.
Yeah. So one of the great descriptions of this process to me was when Deepak Chopra was on Jimmy Fallon, and he talked about the change process being chaotic. And if you look at how water transforms from liquid to gas, that boiling process with all those bubbles popping everywhere is the chaos of the change from the liquid to the gas. So as we're looking at changing form right now, we're still in this chaotic time.
Okay, well, listen, we got to wind this down a little bit. Can you give me like a 1-minute takeaway of the book? So if somebody picks up the book and reads it, what do you think their takeaway is going to be, or hopefully their takeaway will be?
So my hope is that we deal with the discomfort and push through, knowing that there's really a beautiful opportunity for healing on the other end, and that we deal with some of the not so greatness of our culture and recognize that it has nothing to do with the level of melanin in our skin, that we're all capable of being humanitarian, and that there's value in all of us. And if we can start appreciating the value in others in a way that we haven't before, we can lead to a really beautiful humanitarian based society. And I think humanity is achievable.
Well, I think that's a great message. My guest is JD Mass, and your book is called, let me get it right this time, Race for What? A White Man's Journey and Guide to Healing Racism from Within. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Sure, it's raceforwhat.com, and that's FOR spelled out, raceforwhat.com.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. This was a nice conversation. And how long has the book been out?
The book actually will be out on March 29th is the release date.
Oh, okay, so it's just coming. All right.
Yes.
Is pre-order available at this point?
Yes, absolutely. On the website, and through the website, the ebook is available on Kindle.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, JD, and best of luck. I hope the book does well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity.
Can't do it just halfway. All the way on love. It's a big